Good afternoon and welcome to the Chatham Select Board March 2nd, 2021 meeting. This meeting is being recorded and will be available shortly hereafter for scheduled and on-demand viewing on any smartphone or tablet device. If anyone else is recording the meeting, please notify me. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 23rd, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Chatham Select Board is being conducted via remote participation. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen to this meeting while in progress may do so by calling the phone number 1-508-945-4410, conference ID 134-208-476#, or join the meeting online via Microsoft Teams through the link on the posted agenda. While this is a live broadcast and simulcast on Channel 18, despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide for real-time access. We will post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as possible. For efficiency, while we're using this remote format, please mute your audio until called on, which you can do so if you're using the Teams app by raising your hand feature in the app, or if you're on a phone, you may speak out to me, the chair. Equally important, please disable your video until the appropriate time to present or comment. This is a business meeting, and I'm pretty sure you don't want us to see your living room and what you're doing in it sometimes. You might be eating or you may be lounging, but I'm pretty sure that you'd prefer that's not broadcast on Channel 18. Anyway, we'll just move on to to establish a quorum, and we're going to go to a roll call. And I'll start by calling on the board members. Select Board Member Kokolis.
Present.
Board Member Metters.
Present.
Board Member Nicastro.
Present.
Board Member Dykens.
Present.
Okay, everybody's here. We have a quorum. First order of business is to accept the meeting minutes from February 23rd, 2021. Do I have a motion to do so?
So moved, Peter.
Second?
Second.
Any additions, edits, or comments on the meeting minutes? None? Wow. Okay, we'll take a vote to accept them. Peter.
Aye.
Dean.
Aye.
Jeff.
Aye.
Corey.
Aye.
And Chair says aye. Did I get Jeff? Did I get?
Yes.
Okay.
Nice job, Donna.
Okay. Good job, Shauna. It's always awesome. All right. So our second is just to review the meeting as I've been doing every week because we are on Teams, and so everybody's aware. There could be new members that have jumped on. We're going to go through the public announcements and agenda item requests next. Then we'll go to new business, where we will get a coronavirus update from Dr. Duncanson and from our town manager, Jill Goldsmith. Thereafter, we will accept public comments, which is a total, you may speak for a total of 5 minutes on any of the subject matters in our business agenda, which tonight is the 2021 annual town meeting article review for fiscal year 2022, the educational budget articles for the Cape Cod Tech and Monomoy Regional School District. Then after that, we will convene our Affordable Housing Board of Trustees and go into executive session. And that will conclude our meeting. We will not return back to the regular meeting after that. All right, so tonight, public announcements and agenda item requests. If you noted in our packet from last week, and what we decided is that we have a town meeting date for June 12th, correct, Jill? Am I correct? And then an election day is June 17th?
Yes.
Okay, and that's our election day. So those are our dates that we're working towards. And for the board, just to, in respect to future agenda items, I want you to mark your calendar. We are clearing the deck on March 16th for a warrant article discussion and vote to vote on the COA 1610 Main Street. And Jill, I wanted to ask you if you would add to the presentation input from Director Speakman on the COA's community value and quality of life. I think it'll be important to hear that, as well as the nuts and bolts of the COA at 1610. Okay, that's all the other thing is, I know we've been bouncing around a little on meeting times. Selectman Dykens was kind enough to accommodate us for a 5 p.m. start time as we went through the budget review process. And we are going to go back to a 5:30 start, and as long as it's working out for everybody on the board. So we will, going forward, we'll be at 5:30. And thank you, Jeff, for accommodating that. Again, if there's any issues, then we'll take it up at that time and do a different time start. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yep.
Is there any board members that would have any public announcements or agenda item requests? Okay, I don't see any. Anybody from the public have a,
Sure.
yes, Jeff, go
Yeah.
ahead, Jeff.
I just, I know we've got a really full slate and stuff. There's so much action down on Hardings Beach. I just love to get a little update on the dredging and how it's going, and you know, just a little update. Nothing fancy. Just how's
Okay.
it going? Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Any other board members? Okay, I don't see any. Any from the public? Any public announcements or agenda item requests? Okay. I'm not seeing any. All right, so we're going to move into a coronavirus update from Director of Natural Resources, Dr. Duncanson, and Town Manager Jill Goldsmith after each of their presentations. I don't know, Jill, you had said you don't have anything to update this week, right?
As long as Dr. Bob talks about our office hours by appointments, but we're not doing COVID vaccine appointments at town hall.
Thank you. Yes, we needed that clarification. Okay, so from Dr. Duncanson, and then the public may ask some questions of Dr. Duncanson if they have any. Welcome, Dr. Bob.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Chair, and the rest of the board. So quick update tonight. Right now in Massachusetts, as of this afternoon, we have 582,844 cases. And we've had, unfortunately, 16,182 deaths in the Commonwealth. In Barnstable County, as of this afternoon's update, we've had 10,133 cases. And that is up 4 cases, which is a 90% reduction from the previous day. The last few days, we've been averaging around 40 cases. And so only to have 4 cases in the last, since yesterday is great news. And hopefully it's not just an anomaly, but a sign that things are really trying to settle down. There's been 405 deaths on Cape Cod so far, and that's an increase of none from the previous day, which again continues the good news. In Chatham, we currently have we've had 259 cases since the pandemic began. And if you let me share my screen here quickly. Hopefully everybody can see the graphic. This is a graph showing our cases since the pandemic began. And in February, we had 40 cases, which is one of the lowest months we've had since prior to December, when the peak started going up. And in January was our worst month overall with 106 cases. So clearly we are coming on the downslope of that surge from, you know, the Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's holidays. So that continues to be great news. And hopefully the graph will continue to drop and we'll get back to where we were, you know, for the vast majority of last year with very low case counts in Chatham. Just quickly also showing the age distribution of cases in Chatham. And hopefully you can all see that graph right now. We had 258 cases as of the end of February, which this graph covers. We've had 1 case so far in March, which is not shown on here. But you can see, unfortunately, the largest majority of cases were in Chatham, were in the 90 and above demographic, followed by the 70 to 79-year-olds, and then the 20 to 29-year-olds. The rest of them, we're all fairly consistent, fairly low for the most part. And this has been staying pretty much the same over the last, month or so, after we kind of had that real severe peak mid-December to mid-January, when unfortunately we had the outbreak at the Liberty Commons nursing facility, which unfortunately affected a large number of the older population. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen. And just a couple other things I wanted to touch base on. I know vaccine is a very hot, well, let me touch base on one other thing that the public may not be aware of yet. Chatham went out of the red zone, the notorious red zone, as of last Thursday. And we did it fairly substantially. We went from red all the way to green. We skipped the yellow zone. So again, that's just great news. Our percent positivity rate as of last Thursday was 3.47%. And that's down substantially. We were up in the 10 to 11% range. The state's positivity rate at that time was 1.85%. So again, we were still roughly twice as high as the statewide average, but down significantly. So again, that just indicated that we are coming down off the major highs that we had mid-December to mid-January. And keep in mind that positivity rate and our standing is based on the prior 2 weeks. So since that time, we've had even fewer cases. So the good news continues. As everyone I'm sure knows, we did go into, the Commonwealth went into phase 3, step 2 as of yesterday. And we had talked a little bit about what that meant. Indoor venues and performance venues were able to open at 50% capacity. Restaurants no longer have a capacity limit. They still have to abide by the 6 feet between tables. So that is a de facto capacity limit based on how much space they have in the restaurant. Restaurants do still have the 90-minute time limit on people dining. So just be aware of that. And they also they are still limited to no more than 6 people per table. That also stays in place. One of the other things is restaurants are now allowed to have musical performances, although they can't have singing indoors. Any singing has to be in an outdoor venue. So there's no singing in restaurants currently allowed. And then the other major item is that hopefully on March 22nd, all the public health metrics continuing to show positive results. The Commonwealth will move into phase 4, step 1. And the big item there is that large outdoor stadiums and arenas, those seating more than 5,000 people, will be able to reopen at 12% capacity. So that will impact places like Fenway Park and Gillette Stadium. The other thing that folks may want to be aware of is that overnight camps, so overnight camps that were closed last summer, will be able to open in summer 2021. So that's great news for the parents that, may want to have some away time for the kids, or from the kids who want to have some away time from the parents as well. Then in terms of specifically Chatham, as Jill mentioned, starting today, we did return to our town offices being available by appointment only. So on Tuesdays from 1 to 3 and on Thursdays from 9 to 11, if residents or visitors have business that they can't get done, by phone, by email, over the internet, and they absolutely have to come in and see a staff member, they can make an appointment to come in during those hours, and we will accommodate them, obviously socially distanced, wearing masks, and we do have a COVID, an appointment tracking form that we ask folks to fill out, which, collects their contact information and just ask a series of questions about whether or not, they've had COVID or been exposed to COVID or whatnot. Just in case anything were to happen, we'd have the ability to get in touch with them for contact tracing purposes. So that did go into effect again as of today, Tuesdays and Thursdays by appointment only with town offices. And just as you and Jill both mentioned, that does not include COVID-19 vaccine. The town does not have any COVID-19 vaccine available. We are not scheduling any clinics at this point in time. As you're probably aware, the governor is really directing COVID-19 vaccines to the larger mass vaccination sites run by the state, to hospitals or community health centers that then are running some vaccine clinics. And just on the vaccine topic, because we know that that is always a large topic of interest, as I said, we are anticipating that maybe as early as next week, there will be a vaccine clinic for the Cape opening at Four Seas, pending the availability of vaccine. There have been a number of smaller clinics, held around the Cape, in Falmouth, in Hyannis, in Orleans, and up in Eastham, but hopefully starting next week, we will be opening a larger vaccine. It is not a state-sponsored mass vaccination site, but it's being run jointly between Barnstable County and Cape Cod Healthcare. And so as soon as we have more information on that, we will be sure to get that out. And I encourage people to sign up for the Barnstable County advance notice of vaccine clinics here on Cape. You could do so through the Barnstable County website, and you will basically get 24 hours notice of when a vaccine clinic on the Cape is going to be made available, so that you can, be at the head of the rush to get to the line to sign up for that. As I'm sure everybody was aware, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine received emergency use authorization on Sunday from the FDA. They started shipping vaccine yesterday. On our DPH call today, we were told that Massachusetts is in line to get about 50,000 doses of the J&J vaccine, probably sometime next week. Right now, the bulk of it will likely be going to the mass vaccination sites, as well as hospitals and other health centers. And then more than likely, that will be it for the J&J vaccine until April. We're not anticipating in Massachusetts to get any more of that vaccine, similar to all the other states. There were about 3 to 4 million doses in this initial allotment that went nationwide. So no one state is getting a huge amount of it. And until they ramp up production, we don't anticipate any more of that vaccine until, either very late in March or the beginning of April. And just to reiterate the guidance from CDC, the Department of Public Health, and everybody else, if you have the opportunity to get a vaccine, take it. Don't wait around saying, I won't take anything other than J&J because it's one dose. If you get the opportunity to get vaccine, whether it's Moderna, Pfizer, or J&J, the best advice is to go ahead and get the vaccine and not to wait and play the odds that you'll be able to get the Johnson & Johnson. There are some other clinics going on Cape this week and next week, but they are only for people that already received their first dose at one of the Cape clinics earlier this month. So if you didn't get a first dose, if you did get a first dose, you should have gotten an email from the county indicating when you would get your second dose. But as soon as we have information out about new clinics, as we've talked about before, the state opens up most of the availability at the mass vaccination sites and other locations on Thursday mornings. And so we anticipate that will be continuing. Some of the pharmacies and all, like CVS and Walgreens, their sites are constantly updated. So, if you're looking to get vaccine from one of those, the best thing to do, unfortunately, is just keep hitting that refresh button online, and hopefully, a vaccine appointment will pop up. But we do anticipate there will be a significant number, around 50,000 more doses or more appointments available this Thursday. So I think with that, That's all the updated information I have, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Bob. Does the board have any questions for Dr. Duncanson? None? Okay. Mark, I'm getting some reverb. I don't know what it is. Okay. Any questions from the remote participants for Dr. Duncanson? Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Bob.
Okay, take care, everybody. Stay well.
Yeah, you too.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
Bob.
All right. So we're going to move on to public comment period. And this will be an opportunity for people to speak about the educational budget articles. So if anybody has a comment, please raise your hand or speak out by phone if you're on the phone. Okay. We don't have any comments popping up for now. So I think we'll proceed with the business agenda board discussion items, which will start with the 2021 annual town meeting articles review of the educational budget articles. And we are going to have our finance director, Alex Halela, start us off. Alex.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, tonight we have both Scott Carpenter, superintendent from Monomoy Regional School District, and Bob Sanborn from the Cape Cod Regional Technical High School in the audience here to, well, remotely here to present their budgets for the FY 2022 year. I did provide a brief memo to the board as an introduction, just with the numbers that are in the budget books and what has changed since the budget was first presented in January to the board. But again, what is being presented today and their presentations, so the differences between January 19th, 2021 and as of February 25th for Monomoy Regional and Cape Cod Regional Technical High School. So again, the tech is looking at a budget for FY 2022 of $451,856. That covers 15 students, an increase over 10 from this year. And Monomoy Regional School District, according to the statutory assessment per the regional agreement, the amount for Chatham is $8,626,285. And I do have to say that both these school districts have held their overall budgets to reasonable increases, but I'm sure they'll speak more to that. So I'm happy to, I think Bob Sanborn is first with the Cape Cod Regional Technical High School budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
How would you like us to handle this, Bob? As you do your presentation, do you want the board to ask you questions as you go along, or would you prefer to wait to the end?
I'm comfortable either way.
Okay. All
so,
right. Well,
do you have the presentation? Is that going to be presented or?
we have what was given in our packet was your operating budget.
Okay.
That obviously, so we have the presentation, yes.
So do you need it projected? No.
Does the board want the budget projected? Maybe for the public's review? Is that?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think for the public anyway.
Yeah. Can you do that? Thank you.
I do have a copy of it here, or do you have it there?
I don't know. Shauna, do we have it available, or is it?
It'll take me just a minute to pull it up.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Shauna.
Shawnee, do you want me to just say beep when I want to go to the next slide? That was a joke.
That'll be fine.
Okay. all set?
Everyone see it?
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, good to go.
Okay.
Okay, so the opening slide here, take a couple of seconds to say that and thank all the taxpayers and the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee for your support over the last many years that made the new Cape Cod Regional Technical High School a reality. As you know, in 2017, we got 76% of the vote to build this facility, and we did take occupation in August and reached substantial completion in September. But in September, I'll be honest, it didn't feel like substantial completion because we have an extensive punch list, which we're still working on to this day. And then there's a lot of field work and outside work still ongoing. But once again, thank you. And we are giving limited tours if people are interested, obviously socially distanced and with proper precautions after school at 3 o'clock. So if you want to contact my office at extension 3400, more than happy to give anybody from Chatham a tour of the facility after the school day is over. I'm happy to say in this new facility, we have 80% of our students in on every day. For vocational training, they're in every day. And for academic training, it is for academic programming, it's every other day. And then we also have some students who are in all the time. So that totaling is about 80% of our student body is in on any given, and we've been doing that since November. So once again, thank you for the support to make the new Cape Cod Regional Technical High School a reality. The next slide, please. The budget I'm presenting is the work of our finance committee, our business administrator, Aaron Orcutt, and it really started last April in an unconventional way, a socially distant way, and definitely a virtual way to get the information from our department heads in different areas of our building to start the process, which usually starts in October with our finance committee. And you see the members of that finance committee with Chairman Tullio at the top. So the work that we worked through October up until January, and then we had our public hearing just this past week in February to support the budget I'm presenting this evening. Next slide. So little snapshot, we have increased by 10 students since last year, which we're very excited about. We have increased our enrollment the last couple of years. Some of you may recall that we had been going down for a couple of years in a row, several years in a row. In particular, the town of Chatham is up 50%, where you had 10 students in FY21, you have 15 now, which goes a long way in explaining the increase in your assessment for the operating budget. And one other area of note on that, you don't have to go backwards, but a large decrease in our largest town of 25 students in Barnstable. So as you look at this enrollment slide, the towns of Barnstable and Yarmouth comprise, as you see, over 50% of our student enrollment, but they're much closer than they were this past in FY21 due to that increase in Yarmouth and decrease in Barnstable. And Chatham obviously is comprising 2.4%, which I believe is an increase in the overall enrollment for Chatham students because of that 50% increase. And this is as of October 1. So you can change that slide if you get a chance. A little history on enrollment. You see from 18 to 19 and 20, we were decreasing, and even years before that. Some of that being demographic, much of that being demographic. I think the new facility and a renewed efforts of our admissions counselor have helped to turn this around. And the last 2 years, we've had some modest increases in our student enrollment, and we do see definitely holding steady or increasing for next fiscal year as well. For the town of Chatham, as I said previously, 2.4% of the overall enrollment, but a large increase percentage-wise from 10 to 15 students. And excited, the last 2 years, there's been an increase in participation at vocational education from students from Chatham, and we're very excited about that. So the budget that we've come to is a 1.99% budget of $15,812,000. You see the increase of 308. And other than FY16, which is where we asked for some additional funds for our feasibility study for the new school, I think we've been very, very good stewards of the taxpayers' money with a negative increase in 17, keeping it under 2, and then 2 years under 1. And then last year, in recognition of the situation with the pandemic and the potential financial impact, we did decrease our FY21 budget that had been a 2.76% increase. So all increases that you see tonight, 1.99, are on that original budget. But we did decrease our budget to 1.34, which effectively kept operating assessments level funded from FY20. That's the reason for 2 separate percentages in the FY21 column. So unfortunately, even though there was a record increase through the Student Opportunity Act, increase in educational funding, as is true with most state funding, it didn't make it over the bridge. State aid is pretty much static and has been for many years, give or take a few $1,000s. This year, I think we received $18,000 more than the previous year, which I believe is about $25 a student. So where the bulk of the revenue source is, as it has been since I've been a business manager and now superintendent, is borne by the 12 towns from Provincetown to Mashpee and Chatham as well. So we are devoting $465,000 of local revenue. The vast majority of that is from our excess and deficiency fund. For those listening, excess and deficiency is similar to free cash on the town side. And for a regional school, we can keep up to 5% of the following year's budget in our excess and deficiency fund. Last year, when we reduced our budget, we also relied heavily and increased our devoting money from E&D. I think it was over $700,000. This year, we're devoting $465,000, and most of that is our E&D. I think $400,000 of that is E&D. The rest is usually interest income and rental facility rental revenues. This chart just shows the same story, that operating assessments fund the budget increases that I've already shared with you, and that state aid you see in the red is relatively static, and as you see in 21 even decreased. So that really just a graphic portrayal of what I've already talked about. Next slide, please. This is just a numerical representation of the budgets over the last many years. You do see that change in 21 from original to revised. You see our local revenue increasing significantly in 21 and in 22 as we realize the economic landscape. So we are proposing, as I said, a $15,812,000 budget with state aid pretty much flat from the original budget of 21. And the overwhelming amount of revenue, once again, coming from operating assessments from the 12 towns. So what is the money used for? 2 areas I'd like to talk about. First of all, people. We are in a people business. The number one, the most important people in our building, obviously, are students, and second are their teachers. And so over 35% of our overall budget is devoted to the salaries of teachers. But then if you look at all salaries to support the operation of a regional vocational school and the benefits associated with those positions, that's over 76% of the budget I'm presenting this evening. I will say that there's an area there called retiree benefits, which I do want to cover a little more extensively when we get to talking about OPEB towards the end. But we now, as a region, have more retired members than we have active members of our staff. So other post-employment benefits, or OPEB, which many of you have heard of, is a big deal for us as that pool of retirees continues to grow. One other area to talk a little bit about is transportation. We are in the middle of that's fine, you're good. We're in the middle of a 5-year contract with Cape Destinations, a Harwich local company that is a fixed contract. We are expending a significant more amount on transportation this particular year as we endeavor to have 80% of our students in the building. It has necessitated us having a 2-tiered bus schedule. We see that returning to normal for the budget we're talking about this evening. Go ahead. This is just a numerical representation of that pie chart. Once again, you see that 35% being devoted to teacher salaries. And you see that the retiree benefits that I was talking about are now $834,708. Okay. So for this budget, the town of Chatham is being asked for the operating portion. Alex mentioned a number of 451,000. That's inclusive of the debt service on the new school, which was on a separate slide. But for the operating assessment for the budget I've presented is $301,962, which is a significant increase over FY21 of about $98,000 because of the 50% increase in students. Although it was a small amount of students, the percentage does have an effect, also being a modest increase in the overall enrollment of Chatham students in the student body. So that is the assessment for this budget for the town of Chatham. A little bit about E&D. I said we've devoted a good amount of money, but we are not exhausting it by any means. The certified balance in our E&D account, which primarily is used for excesses and deficiencies, but also as a revenue source for budgets, we still have 3.1% of this year's budget, or the next year's budget that I'm proposing in that fund. So I think we've been pretty prudent about it. You know, we don't, in the old building, we used to think of this fund as if something catastrophic happened with the building, with a new building, that is less of a likelihood. But we still have a balance in there for any sort of an emergency. Okay. So OPEB, we became a member of the OPEB, Plymouth County OPEB Trust in 2015 to look to address the costs of retiree post-employment benefits. And we have devised through our finance subcommittee a strategy that is a 28-year strategy where we are devoting, I think in this budget, it's $200,000, and that will increase by $50,000 in subsequent years for 2 more times to get to $300,000. And then we are going to leave $300,000 as what we dedicate to OPEB for, I want to say it's about a 15-year period, at which time we also have a number in this budget for the Barnstable County Retirement System, which is a Barnstable County assessment of, I believe it's just under $500,000 this year, and that's for the Barnstable County Retirement System. If they're scheduled to retire, their unfunded liability retires, we plan to devote that amount of money also to the unfunded liability of retiree benefits. So in that 28-year schedule, it will jump from the $300,000. As I said, we're doing $200 in this budget, and we would ramp it up 50 to 3. And then when that Barnstable County unfunded liability is reached, and that's an if, not a, I mean, hopefully it's a when, but it's an if at this point, but that's what they forecast. I think it's around 2040 that they would fund it. We would then devote that, which would bump it up to, at a minimum, $800,000. and we would do that until the unfunded liability was met. We currently have a balance, which is a little bit ahead of schedule of that 28-year plan of $1,813,270, kept in a fund that is invested by an investment committee of the Plymouth County OPEB Trust, of which our business administrator sits on. So far, the 28-year plan is working. We revisit it every year through the finance subcommittee of our school committee, but we do take our OPEB unfunded liability seriously at Cape Tech, and we were in this plan when we went out to borrow, and that was looked on favorably by the issuers of bonds. So that's the status of OPEB at Cape Cod Tech. This is the debt schedule of the project as it stands right now. And you see it retiring in 2039. It was a 20-year level principal at 3.3%, which results in a declining debt schedule. Just keep in mind that capital debt on a yearly basis is apportioned. So the $6,255,000 this year is apportioned across the 12 towns based on the enrollment percentage. So for Chatham, I believe it's 2.4%. And that's how we arrive at a number that's on the next page, I believe, yes, of 149,894. So Alex had mentioned the 451 number. That's this number plus the operating assessment to reach that. And that's the breakdown for the other 12 towns. And this just puts them together to show that 451,000 number that Alex had mentioned at the beginning of my remarks, before my remarks. The final thing I have to talk about is something brand new, ESSER 2 funds. This is the bill that was passed in late December, just before the transition of power. So we are getting around $434,000 as a district, of which 170 some thousand has been set aside to defray assessments, and we plan to give a discount for those districts. We're not giving it; it's prescribed by ESSER 2 to their assessments if their minimum contribution, which is the starting point for assessments, has increased. So if you turn to the next slide, for the town of Chatham, we will be we're keeping the assessment as it is, but the first installment, which all towns pay in quarters, 4 different times during the year, we would discount the first assessment by $7,500, as you see on this chart for the town of Chatham. It's only the towns that saw increases, and really it's the towns that saw increases in enrollment, because that minimum contribution and assessments closely follow enrollment in the funding formula. Obviously, a median income and property wealth also factor in, but every one of these towns saw an increase in their enrollment in this particular year. Okay. So with that, that is the end of my formal remarks. I would open it up to questions.
Great, thank you very much. We'll move right over to questions. We have Dean first.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob, for that presentation. I appreciate it. It was nice to see the picture of the new school building. I remember touring the old building when I was on the finance committee, I believe. And
yeah,
someday I'm going to come over and take a look at the new one. I just really had 3 questions. What is the ranking assigned to the school's bonds? Yeah, you issued bonds in 2019. Do you recall they were ranked?
It was the second level. It was not AAA. It was, I think it was AA+.
Okay, so it's still very good ranking.
Yeah.
The students from Chatham, and I think it's wonderful that we have 5 additional students. I think it's really terrific. I think I told you my dad was a vocational administrator.
Yep.
So that was the topic of discussion at our dinner table. Do you know offhand what the breakdown is or the distribution among the different vocational disciplines is among those 15 students?
I could get that for you, but I do not know that as I speak to you this evening, but I could get that
Okay.
to you.
That would be great. And I know in previous presentations, you've given us information about where your grads are winding up.
Yes, and
I-
last year they discontinued it for the year, the collection of that data due to the pandemic, but I do plan on once again presenting that next year.
Okay, look forward
Because
to
that, as you recall, it's a 1-year graduate follow-up study,
Yeah,
which is a requirement for all vocational technical schools, but that they did discontinue that for the year. But I do see that returning for next year, and I will share that with the board next year.
'Cause historically in recent years, you've had really good results in terms of what your graduates wind up doing, both in the trades, professions, going on to further education. It's really been impressive.
Yeah,
So thank you again for the presentation. I appreciate it.
I
Thanks a lot.
appreciate it. Thank you.
All set, Dean? All
Yes,
right.
thank you, sir.
Okay, Jeff?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hello, Superintendent Sanborn. Certainly
Hello.
nice to see. I see you at least once a year at this time of year, so it's good to
Yes.
see you. I thought it was a great job in the budget.
Thank you.
Tight. I echo Selectman Nicastro's comment about +5 for Chatham. I think it's really cool. I have two quick questions.
Yep.
Some of which you've kind of already touched on, but what's the most popular program at the school? The top 1 or 2 or 3 or so.
You know what's funny is this year, for the first time in many years, our culinary program was the most popular program this year, which I think probably because of the new school and the new facility that they have. I would say that was one of the programs that received a big boost from the new facility. So I'm proud to say culinary is on the upswing. Over the last many years, HVAC, and quite frankly, teachers drive enrollment. Parents would think it's the outlook of the jobs, and that does play a role. And we're happy to say that the 15 programs that we have all have good outlooks, but HVAC has been very, very strong in many years. Electrical, plumbing, our whole construction cluster is very, very popular, followed by the medical offerings of dental and health assisting. But this past year, as enrollment is increasing, which we're very excited about, pretty much strong performance across the board as far as enrollment, and next year's looking good in our admission season.
Thanks. That's really interesting. It's good information for us. Now, how about graduates going on to associate degree programs and/or 4-year schools as well? What percent of your grads kind of don't go into the trades, but actually go to a 2-year or a 4-year program?
We've been over the last several years, I'd say we've ranged between 25 to 45% pursuing some sort of post-secondary experience. And that can be a technical college, that can be a 2-year, a 4-year, or even a certificate program would qualify. And so between 25 and 45%. We know our mission, and if a student is going on to a technical college to further or something that we've started the path on, that's highly appropriate. And obviously, there are students who go through a program and they learn that wasn't what I want to do. I want to go to college and learn something else, and that's a learning experience as well. But 25 to 45% is is the range of students pursuing further education.
And just one quick follow-up: maybe a school like Wentworth would be very popular, Bob, or
Wentworth, the school in it's escaping me, but in Rhode Island, New England Tech.
New England Tech,
yeah, very, very, very popular. Johnson and Wales is very popular, and obviously Cape Cod Community College is very popular.
Okay, thank you. Good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bob, just a question.
Yes.
Have you guys voted the budget yet? Has that happened?
Yes, the school committee voted the budget in February.
Oh, they did.
Last week.
Okay. All right. I missed that. All right. So we'll be able to take a vote tonight if we want to. I just wanted to check on that. Peter?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and hello, Bob. It's very nice to meet you.
Oh,
The-
nice to meet you.
Anyway,
Although it's virtually.
that's right. Yeah,
Can't
It's,
shake your hand.
both the previous colleagues asked the questions I really had. I just wanted to say too that, increasing by 5, I think that's great. I'm good. I'm
Yeah.
glad we're seeing that. And the second part, I guess what I would only ask is, are we able to keep a number of your students on Cape? Do
Yeah,
they tend to
yes.
do that? If
Yeah.
not,
That graduate follow-up study that I think Dean asked about, we've added a question to that effect because so many people ask that question. Do most of the students? So we were getting a percentage. We were getting percentages in the 60s, 70s, 60 and 70% of the students staying on the Cape to either pursue education locally or to go right into the workforce. And many of you may not know that we have a co-op program where anywhere from 50 to 100 of our students during their technical programs in their 11th and 12th grade years can go right into the workforce through our co-op program where they're earning and learning at the same time. So, and that helps to keep them on Cape, working in jobs that can provide a livable wage on the Cape.
yeah, it comes right to home when you start looking for an electrician and a plumber.
Oh man, what's it like? It's like $200 just to let them in the door.
Got that right. And a good mechanic. Are you kidding? So anyway, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Bob? All right. Okay. So what we can do, guys, is we can take a vote on the budget if you so desire, and we can place it on the warrant. If anybody wants to move for a motion.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
there is a draft article,
there is.
regional school operating budget. I'm sorry, that's for the Monomoy.
On the other side of the
On the
page,
side,
there's,
On the other side, I'm sorry, thank
Yeah.
you. So there's an article for regional school operating budget, Cape Cod Regional Technical High School. It's a short sentence. I'll read it. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $451,856 for Chatham's share of the regional educational and school expenses and charges, including without limitation of the foregoing debt and interest, wages, salaries, and expenses for operation of the Cape Cod Regional Technical High School for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2021 and ending June 30th, 2022, inclusive, or take any other action in relation thereto. I move that we place that on the warrant of the annual town meeting for 2021.
do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion before we take a vote? None? Okay, let's take a vote. Peter,
Aye.
Corey,
Aye.
Dean,
Aye.
Jeff,
Yes, aye.
and the chair says aye. Okay, a motion to recommend?
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
second from Peter. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none. Peter,
Aye.
Corey,
Aye.
Dean,
Aye.
Jeff,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. All right, so we have placed it on the warrant and recommended it. Bob, thank you. Good
thank
luck.
you very
It
much.
sounds like the school is moving along very well.
I
And
appreciate it.
it's a great asset to the Lower Cape, definitely. And we appreciate your time tonight.
I sure hope we can do this in person next year.
Yes, that would be great, wouldn't it? All right, take
Thank you.
care. All right,
Bye-bye.
bye-bye. Back to you, Alex. I believe.
I'm back. Okay, yes, thank you. Thanks, Bob, for the report. Next up, we have Scott Carpenter here to give us the presentation on the Monomoy Regional School District budget. I think it's noted in your packet, there is a slight increase in their overall budget. However, due to the local minimum contribution and the number of students that Chatham has, per the regional agreement, which is a statutory assessment, Chatham's assessment is decreasing next year. And I'm sure that Scott will go into some detail on this. But right now we are looking at an assessment of $8,626,350. And again, that does include the debt service, the capital, operating, and transportation costs.
Okay, Alex, thank you. Thank you. Scott?
Thanks, Shireen.
Hi.
Michael McMillan, our business manager, and I will sort of team up to do the presentation. Michael will project for us initially, and I'll give an overview, and then just come back at the end and do sort of a historical comparison, because as Alex mentioned, there's a decrease in the assessment for Chatham, and just want to sort of give a little overview in terms of how that's been tracking over the years.
All right,
So,
thank you.
So can you see it?
Not yet. We don't see it yet.
I don't see.
it was up there a second ago, Michael.
Let's see. How's that?
There
There
it
it
is.
is. Yep.
All right.
Thank you. And again, Scott, are you okay with the board just asking questions as they go along if they so feel?
Feel free,
necessary?
yes, feel free to ask questions as we go along, and Michael and I will jump in and answer them as we go along if needed. So
Okay,
just
thank you.
to give everybody just an overview of this budget, we are presuming that we're back to a business as usual for next year, but it's still rather unclear. It's good to hear Dr. Duncanson give his his COVID updates, and that we're seeing the rates decline. We're seeing the Johnson & Johnson vaccine starting to roll out, and hopefully we'll be at a place where where our staff are vaccinated in the upcoming month or two, and that we see the the majority, if not all, of our students vaccinated heading into the school year. So I'm cautiously optimistic that we'll be in a much better place next year and back to more of a business as usual, but it's still rather unclear. There is some we'll call it COVID residual in this budget, where we are carrying some additional nursing staffing heading into next year just in case. The main driver in this budget is there continues to be a decline in the number of children in Chatham relative to Harwich, which creates a shift in the minimum required contribution. I think Bob, in his presentation just a few minutes ago, really emphasized that foundation enrollment, or the enrollment, drives the minimum required contribution, which drives the assessments, and we see that year after year in his budget, and we see it in ours as well. And so when you're in a regional school district, you see it play out as enrollment increases or decreases in one town relative to another. Those minimum required contributions shift, and then the assessment shifts. There is a slight reduction in staffing behind this, because we're seeing a slight reduction in enrollment. So we're trying to have our staffing follow the enrollment. But at the end of the day, this budget maintains all of the services and programs that were in place prior to the start of this pandemic. So, so all of those clubs and activities and things that that we were really proud of at Monomoy, we anticipate all of those up and running, and us returning to a new normal going into the next school year. So I'll turn things over to Michael for a little while.
All right, thank you very much, Superintendent. So just as we developed the budget, we had in mind certain guidelines which steered us as we made decisions between priorities, the district's mission statement, as well as the strategic plan objectives, which you can see here. We also aim to keep class sizes at an average of 18 plus or minus 1 at the elementary school, and 19 plus or minus 2 at the middle and high school. We also sought to develop a budget that was data-driven, transparent, as I hope you'll agree after these presentations, and but also that recognized the financial environment of both towns. So there are some assumptions we made in developing this budget. We have, as the superintendent outlined, anticipated overall level enrollment in our schools, but with the high school continues to grow in population while the lower grades contract a little. There's, as the superintendent highlighted as well, there's no changes to services. The preliminary FY22 Chapter 70 and minimum required contribution numbers from the state are now included in this budget, as are health insurance figures. So although we have talked, and we will continue to, about student enrollment, this slide just serves to highlight that, although the numbers are going down, it's not just the numbers which drive the budget needs and the needs of our students. For example, students with disabilities, English learners, and those economically disadvantaged. As those numbers change, that also impacts the needs on our budget. In particular, here you can see that English learners has increased by 42% in this district over the last 5 years, compared to just 20% in the state overall. And again, this just shows how the overall enrollment isn't changing as much as individual schools. So you can see this blue line is the high school, which has increased, whereas we have Chatham here, this orange line is going down, as is the Harwich Elementary School. And then that was just to highlight, we said earlier on, one of our guiding principles was to maintain class sizes, and we have done that this year. So although the numbers we have changed some of the staffing, as I'll talk about, we have maintained class sizes as we plan to. All right, so this is the budget summary of where we are for FY22. I thought I'd get to the number fast this time, and then I'll go into some more detail on some of the things that have driven these figures. So this is a $408,411 increase from last year, which is just shy of 1%. And I mean, as expected, this is driven by the increase in instruction, which is increased by $615,000. So that includes salaries, obviously, particularly of our teachers and other instructional staff, but it does also include an increase in their budget for substitutes. And there is a account change in here where we moved some costs over from operations and maintenance. Other things just to highlight is health insurance has led to a reduction in our fixed charges for next year, and this increase in other school services, that is partly an accounting change, but also, as I'll talk about, we're maintaining one nursing position that was added this year. Oh, there was one other thing I just wanted to highlight down here. So the debt and retirement service, that is as we progress with payment on the high school project, the costs of that have gone down. And this slide really just shows how that our budget increase fits in a historical context. As you can see, this will be the lowest increase since back in FY14, when it was actually our FY14 into FY15, it was actually a decrease. So it's the lowest increase that there's been in some time. And that is, well, in FY20 and 21, there was no increase in health insurance, and although there's a slight decrease this year. So we just wanted to, give you an idea of what we are able to buy with this budget. Through the budget process, our principals and directors identified specific needs which should help us to further the district's strategic objectives. So many times these items are paid for through reductions in our savings and other areas. I just wanted to highlight a couple in this list. One is the math interventionist at the high school, as well as a math assistant position being converted to full-time at Chatham Elementary School, and also the reading specialist at the middle school. So those are all key positions which will help drive forward the district's strategic objectives. Unfortunately, of course, not everything that we would like to implement in this budget was possible, especially with such a low percentage increase. And this is those items which principals and directors identified, but which we were not able to fund. And here I would just like to emphasize there are a couple of special education positions, particularly the special education teacher at the high school and the team chair position at Chatham, and also the speech and language position. And I should just say, we will continue to look at where we find savings within the budget or other funding sources which might help us fund some of these priorities. So over the next few slides, I'm just going to highlight a couple of the elements which tend to drive our budget. One of those is out of district expenditure. This is when we are not able to meet the needs of students at schools within the district, and so we pay for their tuition for them to attend schools outside the district. And this number can fluctuate quite a lot, as you can see how it's changed over the last 9 or 10 years. Looking ahead from 20, we saw a sort of notable increase from 20 into 21. However, we're seeing it be relatively a small increase going into 22. However, we do receive reimbursement from the state in the form of the circuit breaker funding, and that has increased going into FY22. So although the total cost for this is increasing, the impact on the budget is actually decreased because of that reimbursement. Obviously, school choice tuition and charter school tuition, that's when students who live in Chatham or Harwich attend either a school in another district or a charter school. We have to pay their tuition. And this is actually a relatively good news that these numbers do seem to be going down. However, it's not quite clear what the impact of COVID will be. It did bring numbers down this year, and we've kind of taken a cautious approach and are assuming that these figures will stay level going into 22 as we see how COVID and other trends play out. Health insurance, the average health insurance rate since FY13 has been around 7%, although there hasn't really been an increase in rates since FY19. The Cape Cod Municipal Health Group has voted for increases between 2 and 3% for FY22. However, there is going to be a premium holiday, which means that for 1 month next year, employees and employers won't have to pay the premium for health insurance. And so overall, that's actually a reduction in our health insurance budget for FY22. A couple of other things just to highlight: custodial supplies and services. We have budgeted some additional funding there as a contingency for COVID-related expenditure, such as additional cleaning and supplies. As I mentioned earlier, we have increased our budget for substitutes to get it back in line with the historic trend that we've seen. Heating is zero budgeted, as is utilities. And there are a couple of other areas throughout the budget, for example, in unemployment, where we've seen that COVID has impacted and driven up those costs. We have budgeted a small increase in capital expenditure this year. We have a number of facilities projects and a number of technology projects. The technology projects are all existing leases, so we aren't starting any more technology projects this year. These are just continuing leases that were entered into prior to FY22. We do have a number of projects identified for improving facilities, including the big one really is this kick off a project to replace our phones and PA system at Chatham, Harwich, and at the middle school. Also some smaller projects at Harwich and the middle school and high school to buy a vehicle or start a lease payment on a vehicle for student community programs. And as part of this, we are hoping to deposit another $50,000 in the stabilization account. However, looking ahead, I do think there's going to be an increase in our facilities needs, particularly at the middle school, where we need some work done in the exterior of the building. We also know that the roofs at the middle school and in the Chatham Elementary School will need to be replaced soon, and the athletics track and field at the high school is in the not too distant future. So we kind of identified some of the major drivers for the budget and the expenditure that we expect to see. Our overall expenditure is reduced by certain funds which help to offset that expenditure. Those are school choice. So I mentioned earlier school choice tuition that we have to pay, but we also receive school choice tuition from students who come to Monomoy from other school districts. And we are actually a net benefiter, so we receive more funds than we spend on school choice, which is definitely a good thing. And overall, that will offset our budget to the tune of around 1.3 million. Circuit breaker, which is, so the tall light blue line is school choice, then the dark blue line there is circuit breaker. And that has increased, that is based on special education expenditure, particularly for out-of-district placements I mentioned earlier, and we have seen an increase in that this year. It will be used to offset next year's budget. And then the other items, IDEA, Title I, and so on, are grants from the federal government. They help to offset or help to pay for programs and services within the district. And then the last one is the Make Way for Kids program, which is not being run anymore. So although that did offset the 21 budget, it will not offset the 22 budget. And likewise, athletics revolving account, given the restrictions on participation because of COVID, or a participation and a attendance at the games, we've not been able to bring in so much money from the athletic revolving account, and so that won't be able to be used for next year's budget. But overall, and particularly driven by the circuit breaker change, was an increase in those offsets to our budget. And then this just shows how we compare to other districts based on per pupil expenditure in FY19. As you can see, we are relatively close to the middle. I mean, I think one of the main takeaways from this is the smaller you get, the higher your per pupil gets, of course. So that's kind of what I've talked through really is the budget process. And now that we have the budget figure, the next step is to calculate the assessments to each town. And the first step of that is, so we start with the budget number, and then that budget number is offset by general fund revenue and state aid. And as you can see from this nice pie chart, the biggest chunk of this category is Chapter 70. So that's the funds we receive from the state to help fund our education expenditure. And also, as a regional school district, we receive transportation funds from the state to help reduce our costs. And then we're also able to use our excess and deficiency fund to help offset our budget. So those are the main ways in which our budget is offset before we calculate the assessment. So as you know, one of the other major factors in our assessment, and I'll go through the assessment process in a bit more detail in a moment, but one of the other main factors is the minimum local contribution. So the way our assessment works is after we've offset our expenditure with our general revenue and state aid, general fund revenue and state aid, each town has to pay its required minimum contribution. And that is based on a number of factors, but it is driven by enrollment, foundation enrollment. So you can see here, so the chart on the left is for Chatham, and the chart on the right is for Harwich. And I put both of these charts to scale so you can see the difference between the two towns. And the left-hand axis shows the required minimum contribution, and that's the green bar chart. The orange bar chart. And the axis on the right is for enrollment, and that's matches up with the blue line. So you can see that, actually the trend from Chatham and Harwich is similar, and the fall is similar, but it's just a much bigger proportional change for Chatham. And so you can see that Chatham's foundation required minimum contribution goes down along with the foundation enrollment, whereas Harwich's the minimum contribution goes up while the foundation enrollment goes down. And that's just to do with the way the calculation for minimum local contribution is done in a regional district. So, as I said, we start with the assessment, with the budget. In order to calculate the assessment, we start with the budget, which, as I mentioned, is just shy of 1% increase from FY21. It's then offset by these key funds, particularly Chapter 70 and excess and deficiency. So that's just a 5.3 million, which is down $166,000 from last year. And then we calculate the assessment to each town. So first of all, each town pays a local minimum contribution. And so you can see Harwich's is an increase of $89,000, whereas Chatham's is a reduction of $334,000. And then the remaining operating assessment above that local minimum contribution is then split between the two towns based on a 3-year rolling average of a foundation enrollment. So a significant increase for Harwich and a modest increase for Chatham. Transportation is split up based on the October 1st enrollment each town. And our overall costs are down slightly, which has brought that down. Overall costs are down, and also a regional aid offset from the state is up. And then capital and debt is based on the foundation enrollment, and debt's going down overall, why you see that reduction. And so the overall impact of this assessment calculation is a 3.07% reduction for Chatham and a 3.16% increase for Harwich. We have talked about, and this may be something we'll talk about this evening, but an alternative assessment method. And this is one example of what we might do, where each town pays first pays the local minimum contribution, as is the current process, and then pays for just the elementary school costs. So that's the amount budgeted at that building and related health insurance. And the impact of and then you continue to implement the assessment calculation as it currently stands. And the impact of this would be a smaller increase for Harwich and an increase for Chatham. So I'm going to pass over to Superintendent Carpenter to give us a bit of the history of how the assessment has changed over the last 13, 14 years.
So, so Chatham, the assessment that Michael had said is that we'd be looking at about an $8.6 million assessment for Chatham. And if you look back historically, that's what Chatham was spending on its schools back in 2007. Harwich at the same time has had increases in its school spending. And I know that there's some angst that we've heard from the Harwich Select Board, and I can understand how there's this want to have the negative assessment changes each year that Chatham has recently been seeing. And the one thing I was emphasizing at our school committee meeting, it's not that the statutory method is broken. So both towns, I would argue, have benefited from the statutory method. The reality is that this is an enrollment challenge. So Michael, if you want to flip to the next slide. So this graph really looks at foundation enrollment, the minimum required contribution, and the assessments. And if you look at the blue lines all clustered together are really just how those three factors all just sort of follow the same trend for Chatham. The orange and yellow green lines are those three factors for Harwich. So at the end of the day, it's enrollment that's driving the minimum required local contribution, and then that's ultimately driving that that assessment. So we are seeing trends that are enrollment driven, and that's what's driving these changes, the changes in assessment, and it's what's causing the Chathams in recent years to be going negative relative to Harwich, so that Harwich has been seeing some increases and Chatham some decreases. Mike, flip to the next slide. Just to remind people of a timeline here, FY11 was the last time our two school districts were completely operating separately, from a budgetary and administrative perspective. So December 6, 2010, there was a vote to form the region at a Chatham town meeting and a simultaneous Harwich town meeting. In FY12, the district operated a regionalized central office under a transitional superintendent, but still had 2 high schools and 2 middle schools and 2 elementary schools. FY13 is when I come on as the superintendent to bring the new regional school district fully together. But in that first year, we're still seeing the district operating with 2 high schools, 2 middle schools, and 2 elementary schools. And then in FY14, the district fully regionalizes. And that's where we see some of the benefits and savings of regionalization, where we now go to 1 high school, 1 middle school, and 2 elementary schools. And that was the short of the budget that we're presenting this year, that that budget was the least increase, or it was actually a decrease back then, because we were seeing sort of the full benefits fiscally of regionalization. This budget that, as Michael has presented, it's a budget that's just under a 1% increase, and again is meant to be as fiscally responsible as we can, knowing that our taxpayers right now are struggling with many of them out of work, and some of the challenges that COVID's presented to the taxpayers in both towns. Michael, the next slide. So one of the things that I just want to emphasize is that Chatham and Harwich have both seen benefits from regionalization. It's not just on a financial front, and there has been financial savings, I would argue, for both towns, more so for Chatham. But both towns got a wonderful, beautiful new high school, modern high school. They have use of a great middle school at Chatham, that the Chatham Middle High School used to, the former Chatham Middle High School that's now Monomoy Regional Middle School, and the curriculum that the district has rolled out and the offerings that students have. Again, I think much superior than either town when they were running their systems independently, and the outcomes that students are seeing on the other end, again, are greatly enhanced. So that key dividing line is really FY11. So Chatham was tracking with 4.1% increases year over year, averaging on its schools in the years heading up from FY7 to up to FY11. Since FY11, since regionalization, Chatham has seen on average, if we exclude the debt, has seen on average a 1.7% decrease year over year. Again, largely driven by enrollment shifts going down, where Chatham's enrollment is just declining at a much faster rate than Harwich's enrollment. But both towns are seeing enrollment declines, just like every town across the Cape is seeing enrollment declines. And then, just for comparison, Harwich, if we again look at the costs excluding debt, Harwich was seeing 3.5% increases in its school spending in those years, FY7 to FY11, and since then, it's not seeing negative assessment increases, but it is seeing increases over a percentage point less than what it was realizing prior to regionalization. So there has been some financial benefit to both towns by this school district marriage, so to speak. But the students and families are also seeing, I think, just much better services and opportunities for their kids in the new district. So we'll stop there, and I see there's a number of hands, and we'll go from there.
Okay, great, thanks. Peter, your hand was up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Scott and Michael. That was a clear presentation, and I appreciate, under 1% total. That's excellent. I mean, how can you ask for anything more than that? I agree with a number of comments that Scott just made. I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach to it, and maybe reinforce something that you had said, and at the expense of overstating it, I'm going to say it anyway. I believe that both towns have benefited from regionalization. First thing is, if you took the last two charts and you did a difference between the two towns, you would see a large variations over the past years in the amount that Chatham, from a numbers point of view, the amount of money that Chatham has paid, which continually comes down, and the amount of money that is assessed against the Harwich group. But I think before we start, because our meeting the last time we met with Harwich was fine, but it was be blunt, a little adversarial, but it was very gentlemanly like. But anyway, let me make the bottom line for the towns. I think that the towns have benefited from a regionalization. I think the students have. All you have to do is look at the, as you say, products and the end result. It's much better. And I would just say, stop and think where we were if Chatham wasn't in regionalization right now, or Harwich. You know, that new high school cost a few bucks, and where would we be without having regionalization? Even though we have our discrepancies now, you know, take a look again at the amount of money that each town has been assessed over the years. There's been a difference of up to $1 million. This is not the first time this happened. It happened 2 or 3 times if you look down at the charts that you have, and I did a median and an average. Harwich is an average is spent somewhere up or over 800 plus, and Chatham has come down to something like 75 or whatever. But we're declining. My issue is that there is a systemic CAPE problem of young folks moving out of, and that's the problem. And I mentioned at the last meeting in January that the biggest problem is Chatham, because we lost the largest number of students when you're looking at it at the elementary level. That means it's not like the differences we've had in the last few years. Well, this is a problem. Restate what Scott has said. It's a problem that's going to go out in the long term because we're not filling up we're not filling in from the bottom up. And I'm not denying that. But my point is, I get the sense, especially from some of the stuff that was in the press, that there's this rush to judgment that want us to make a decision right now on something that's a long-term problem. I agree we should address it. And I agree that we have to look at it, but the way Chatham has addressed our problems, like these big type problems, major problems, and by this board and some of the previous boards, is we go out to our citizens and we do a forum and we get inputs from all of them. It's much better than sitting in our board of selectmen meetings and getting 6 people come in, or even 10 or 12. So my thing is, I don't respond well to being pushed into some sort of a negotiation and get it done by some period of time, or there's a threat that they're going to not do something. That bothers me, and I don't think that's helpful both to this board or for their board. And I tend to be pretty candid about certain stuff, and I think that the regional school district is going to take a look, or the school committee is going to have a forum tomorrow night. We're going to try to do something, and I think we can accommodate something. The question is the alternative assessment the right thing to do? At face value, it seems like it is. I'd like to hear what our citizens have to say. Makes sense. What happens in the long term with that assessment? Once we change, we'll have to change the regional agreement. So what happens 3 years from now? We're both towns are trying to address this problem, and it's the cost of living in the town focused on housing, starting with housing. Some have said, oh, it's a fool's errand. You're never going to get people back, and you're not going to be able to get affordable housing. Well, I'll tell you one thing: we don't do anything, but we certainly are going to push to do that. And what happens 5 years from now? We go back and redo our agreement. There are too many. Not that we have to have all the perfect answers. There are too many unknowns. We know what the direction we're going in, and I think we can come up with something. And my last point, not to be taking too much time, is Scott didn't say it this time, or either did Michael. But we have a total number of students. You start swapping them between towns, doesn't change the bottom line. It doesn't change. It's a zero-sum game. Yeah, you can reduce the cost per student at Chatham, but that doesn't take care of the problem of the assessment against each town. So having said that, my point is, I think we need we're moving in the right direction. I just hope that we can do it in a very analytical and civilized way between the two towns. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Jeff?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Scott and Michael, for a good job on the budget. I just kind of want to be reminded that tonight's conversation is about the statutory budget, and I believe you're probably going to be looking for an approval and a recommendation as well. So I want to kind of focus on that. To think that we're only you guys are presenting a budget that only went up $408,000 on almost a $42 million budget, excuse me, is frankly quite remarkable. Less than 1%, and you're saying you're not decreasing any services anywhere, and that's a tribute to you and your staff and to your thoughtfulness as you approach the budget. So I commend you on really a very well thought out budget. Number one. Number two, we await, and I know, so in terms of the budget tonight, I suspect we're going to approve the statutory budget. I know we have a major issue at hand, or a quasi-major issue at hand with the town of Harwich in terms of how we apportion those dollars and how we ultimately might come up with a different assessment of those dollars. And I think that's a little different conversation on a little different timeline than has been suggested by our counterparts in Harwich. And before we finish this evening, I'd like Scott to kind of revisit the timeline that we've talked about before, that I think is a more reasonable approach to having a more mature conversation about the future of the Chatham Elementary School. And it's one I'd like to revisit this evening. So I'm tickled with the budget, the statutory budget. It's likely, I think, to be approved. I had one question in particular, Mike, and I maybe should have interrupted you when you did your slides, but where are we net on school choice? Tuition out, tuition in. What's the net for Monomoy all told, all in?
So
was on slides 12 and 13. Is it the net of those, or?
No, so let me just see. Hold on. I can quickly work it. So we net gain from school choice.
Okay, good.
What that figure is so the budget is like 1.2 million in expenditure.
Okay. Is it like 1.4 in?
Yeah, the revenue that we've budgeted is 1,359. So it's like 160.
And 1.2 out. So not to interrupt you, but we're a little positive there, which is a good. I do want to say this, and I've been involved in this region ever since it was nascent in its infancy, and we've gone back and forth 2 or 3 times before we finally got a vote. Well, for decades, until we finally got a vote in December of 10, and in Chatham we won by a scant 61 votes. But it's been a remarkable accomplishment. And I look, I look at it more as the development of an incredible community asset than I look at it as a cost center. I'll be quite frank. I have a very different lens. I look at it as an asset, and it's an asset that we contributed a middle school that became, or a high school that became a middle school, our financial wherewithal to allow the region to go borrow money at great rates and a lot less money than Harwich would have been borrowing on its own. And we had, a great energy and elan in this town. And I really want to avoid the conversation where it just gets down to a cost center, because the town of Harwich right now has one of the most beautiful physical attributes, structures on that unbelievable campus in the town of Harwich that they've got to really understand. That is one hell of an asset over there in the middle of the school, the fields, and you've got the Harwich Mariners there. It's what a complex. And across the street is the community center. And we've had something to do with that, the development of that, the town of Chatham. So I want us to slow down here a little bit. I would really want to revisit that timeline, if you would, Scott, and understand that we're building an asset for both communities that will do nothing but contribute to the education of our youngsters, which is, again, arguably one of our most important assets, if not the most important asset. So we will bring a mature conversation to our town, but I don't believe as a select board, we can run out ahead of everybody and say, we're going to do X and Y. We got to get our town involved. We need to hear from them. So I really, really do look forward to the forum on Thursday night. I certainly will be in attendance. I really want to hear from the parents, from the school committee themselves. I couldn't get on the meeting the other night. So anyway, I'll hush now, but Scott, if you could just please revisit that time,
Sure.
I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Sure. And in terms of the timeline, we've been talking about 2 very parallel conversations. One is a conversation that is that's really starting publicly on Thursday. Although I've been raising it now for 3 years. Just the that we should look at our district and look at the elementary educational program and get feedback from parents both in Chatham and in Harwich on what makes the most sense for good quality teaching and learning for our children. And there are concerns that that I've raised in the past that Harwich Elementary School is a very large elementary school. Might it be too large? And that Chatham Elementary School, the concern as we've gotten into the recent years, potentially is becoming too small, where we're teetering on one classroom per grade level, 1 or 2, and it's and does it start to get too small? There are challenges. There are challenges on that end, but that conversation starts. We have a forum on Thursday, 6:30 p.m. It's a virtual forum, and I'd encourage the select boards from both towns and parents and community members who are interested to join that conversation. So it's posted on the Monomoy website, but that's 6:30 this Thursday. Then there's the financial conversation, and I was a little worried and concerned about the town at the last or recent Harwich Selectmen meeting, where I think there's a want to sort of accelerate that conversation and have but there are challenges that I was having a conversation even this morning with David Whitcomb, who was asking me about timelines, and I said even if our 2 select boards came up with an agreement tomorrow, we might not be able to get feedback from the Department of Education and sign off on the commissioner on that wording in time for our town meetings in the spring. And what that buys us is time to have a thoughtful conversation this spring, and hopefully come up with some mutually agreeable wording and about an assessment change to bring to a special fall town meeting in each town to look at how we might differently apportion costs. So in the slide that Michael shared that looks at the cost, it's based on a recommendation that I had if the towns looked at funding their own elementary schools, much the same way that some of the towns in the Nauset district or the Nauset sort of region, let's say, do, which would provide Harwich some fiscal relief, and I think on some level take some of the pressure that I think some in Chatham feel about that we need to do something differently. And I want to emphasize for Thursday's conversation, Thursday is not a conversation about closing Chatham Elementary School. And I think there's some misinformation or misunderstandings. In many ways, it's about how can we best support both of our elementary schools, not what should we be closing one. So again, the timelines, that conversation on what makes for good quality teaching and learning is a conversation that begins very publicly this Thursday. And I do anticipate that to be a longer conversation that hopefully goes into the fall of next year when hopefully, knock on wood, people are back having conversations face to face, and that we can get a lot of input and a lot of even committee work on that.
Thank you. Just a quick follow up. I mean, I know in the town of Chatham that folks are galvanized by this conversation, that they very much want to have an elementary school in Chatham and a vibrant and viable elementary school in Chatham, which consists hopefully of 2 grades, et cetera, et cetera. So we really want to, I think we're interested in being fair, but we're also interested in having a viable elementary school for the long term in Chatham as well, as best we can, given, the enrollment challenges that we all face. So I'll end there, and I thank you very much. I thought the budget was very well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Dean, you're next.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Scott and Michael, for the presentation. I thought this was one of the clearer presentations I've heard over the years from Monomoy, and we had 2 very excellent presentations on the schools tonight. I really appreciated that. I think the public does as well. I also want to compliment you on, as Jeff said, on a very, very tight budget, and Peter echoed that as well. It's impressive how you've kept costs under control. I had 2 questions, and then I have some comments. First is, has the school committee approved this budget already? Have they taken their vote?
The school committee doesn't take their vote for a few weeks in terms of their timeline, but I think they have been supportive of what Michael and I and the administrative team have been presenting over the last several weeks and even months.
Would it be in order for, maybe this is a question to our town manager, would it be in order for us to vote to place this budget on our warrant at this time with a recommendation? So I'm prepared to do that later on when the discussion is completed.
Jill.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would suggest that you wait until we actually have the school committee's vote and transmittal to the town, and then vote to place and recommend.
Okay. Thank you. So the second question has to do with one of your slides. You don't have to pull it up, but these are the items that were unfortunately not included in the budget. And one of them was security cameras at various schools. It says all 3 schools. Do we have security cameras in place now?
Yes,
Okay.
we do. We were looking to upgrade them, and that's one of those items which we will look for grants and other funding and hopefully be able to implement it, although we weren't able to get in this budget.
Thank you.
I think it's more of a resolution issue, Dean, where as technology improves, the resolution on your security cameras, which then should something happen, gives us and public safety a better quality film to go back to.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. Yeah, just a couple of comments, and I understand that what's before us is the budget presentation, but the alternative formula was presented as well, and we've had some conversation from my fellow board members, which I'd like to add on to. I read the newspaper account of the recent meeting of our colleagues in Harwich, what I took from it was an expectation that Chatham was simply should be expected to simply hand over a certain amount of money to help them with some financial relief. And I guess just speaking for myself, but I suspect my colleagues agree with me, I'm not prepared to just write a check unconditionally, because I do think, in addition to taking a look at the formulas for assessment, whether it's the statutory formula or the alternative formula that I guess is permitted by statute from what I learned at the recent tripartite meeting. In addition to that, the future of Chatham Elementary School has to be part of the discussion, because this is a unified district. It isn't just a Chatham issue. It's an issue for the whole district, what happens with Chatham Elementary School. And I was the person who suggested at the recent tripartite meeting that Chatham conduct its own citizen forum devoted to an understanding and soliciting ideas for how to keep Chatham Elementary School. So I'm looking forward to that. I also intend to zoom into the district's forum on Thursday. But I guess I want to, and I appreciate what Scott put his finger on one important thing. It's very hard to negotiate via Team Microsoft or Zoom. It's going to be a lot easier when everybody's vaccinated and we're sitting down in the same room face to face, just as we did with the intermunicipal agreement on the sewer issues. I was part of that, as was Jeff. And I think it's easier for counterparts to have a better understanding of where the other side is coming from than if you're just facing one another on a computer screen. So with that said, I think that the town of Chatham is very willing to extend an olive branch to the town of Harwich to try to work on these issues and resolve them in a timely fashion. And I don't think that's this spring, as you were suggesting, Scott. But the process needs to start soon. And we should be looking to some sort of resolution in the fall. And I think everything should be on the table. And I think everything should be on the table for the Chatham forum. And that includes possibly a third assessment formula that's not currently authorized by statute, which might require special legislation. Or maybe we require each town to be responsible for the capital improvements of its own elementary schools, such as roof replacement and so forth. And I'm not recommending these, I'm just recommending that these things be considered. Or perhaps even the most drastic approach would be to withdraw the elementary schools from the district and run them separately in each town, just as they do in Nauset, where each town has its own separate school committee. Again, that's a very drastic approach. But we need to think outside the box, and we need to be willing to sit down and talk about it. And I understand the frustration that is felt over in Harwich. I think if I were on their board of selectmen, I probably would be sounding some of the same themes. But I think we really do have to get together and understand the benefits that have been pointed out that have accrued to both towns. And with respect to Harwich, they didn't just get a new high school, they got a newer middle school building. The Chatham, the middle school of the district was only built in the 1990s in Chatham, and it's been updated since. And there have been some financial benefits as well that have been pointed out. So I guess the sum and substance of what I wanted to say is we understand there are problems and challenges, but I think we as a town benefiting from what I expect will be significant and helpful input from our own citizens are willing to sit down with Harwich to try to work them out in a timely and disciplined fashion. And with that, I'll just say I'm very supportive of the budget with the statutory assessment that has been presented tonight. I look forward to taking a vote once the school committee has exercised its decision. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jean. Corey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Scott and Michael, for the presentation. It was very good, very precise, very detailed. You know, I'm in agreement with my colleagues on most of their comments. I'm not going to really add on to much of what has already been said. I know our job is to kind of look at the numbers and sharpen our pencils, but ultimately, at the end of the day, we're all looking out for the best interest of our students, what's best for them. That's really our ultimate goal for all of us, in my opinion. I do know I had a couple questions on the. There were about a dozen items that were unfunded in the budget this year, and I know every year there's items that don't make the cut. Were there any one or two of these items that were more difficult not to put into the budget this year? And in addition to that question, moving forward, will there be any items that would be a priority for consideration in the next couple years to be considered for the budget? Because 75% of these are staffing elements. So I just want to kind of get an idea of what the outlook is on these things, if possible.
Good question, Corey. I would almost look at that list that's in the presentation becomes the starting point for budget conversations next year, and it, pardon my dog in the background. And it also is a place that, you know, we will be going if for some odd reason we see some, something eases up during the, as we head into the summer months, that we might find that, there's been some unforeseen savings somewhere. Maybe we hire some new teachers at a much lower rate than some of the retirees, and that there are some of those positions that are things that can save the district, potentially going forward. And I think one of the key ones on that list that I think we've been looking at for a while is this concept of a special education team chair at Chatham Elementary School, who also helps us manage the out of district students, and also helps us manage early childhood, much of which for the district is a early intervention program for our district. So that's one. It's got a larger price tag on it, but the hope is that something like that can be something that can recoup some of that salary too, in savings that we see by having that individual in place. So again, there are things that we have had on our list, felt we couldn't get to this year, but have them there, and do see us striving to go and fund them in the upcoming fiscal year.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions, Corey? Okay.
No.
All right. All right. So I'm not going to reiterate everybody's thoughts tonight. I think, we've all said pretty much what we think about the budget. I'm pretty impressed, as Jeff had said, and Dean, on keeping the costs down, especially on a $40 million plus budget. As far as our next steps, obviously we want to hear that the school committee has voted to approve the budget, and then it'll transmit it back to us for approval. During the process, Scott, I think the idea of us dealing with the bigger issue of the assessment down the road and having some thoughtful discussions are the best approach, especially after you said that there was the issues with the state timeline. So we'll move forward that way. And I want to thank you both for your presentation tonight. I think, as we had said before, our biggest concern and our biggest asset are the children of our communities. And the Monomoy Regional School District is a wonderful school district, and we're really proud of it as a town, and want to see only the best for our kids. So thank you tonight, and we'll be tuning in on Thursday night. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, great. All right, so that concludes our budget presentations for the schools, and now we are going to convene the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Board of Trustees and take a motion to go into executive session. So, excuse me, my throat's dry. So I'll start with our board. Dean.
Present.
Corey.
Present.
Peter.
Present.
Jeff.
Present.
Bruce. Bean. You'll have to unmute, Bruce. Megan, Story?
Are we supposed to go to a different site or something?
We
Yeah,
will eventually. We just have to vote to go in, convene, and then do a motion. So
Got it.
I see that Bruce is present. I don't see Megan being present. They haven't called the roll. So, but we do have a quorum. So motion to go into executive session with no return to the regular meeting. Do I have a motion? Somebody want to read it?
Madam Chair,
Go ahead, Dean.
Yeah, I move that the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Board of Trustees go into executive session at this time under Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 39, Section 23B, Number 6, to consider the purchase, exchange, taking, lease, or value of real property, parenthesis, private property acquisition for affordable/attainable housing, close parenthesis, if such discussion may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the governmental body with no return to open session.
Have a second.
Second.
Okay, we'll take a roll call. Dean,
Aye.
Peter,
Aye.
Corey,
Aye.
Jeff,
Aye.
Bruce. He's not there anymore. The chair says aye. Okay, good night, Chatham. Thank you, everyone that behind the scenes that prepared for this evening. And stay safe. We'll go to the next meeting room.